Hey guys, welcome. It's Blaziken Blitz here, and you might see a blank screen right now, and music in the background. That's because we're here today for some draft analyses. A lot of them. So, I say let's get into it. First of all, check out my new layout here. It's pretty sweet, isn't it? I think so. I mean, credit goes out to my friend Woepa. Props for using Photoshop, which I can't do very well. Anyway, the layout will be used for these draft analyses and also the battles that I'm going to be uploading hopefully soon, because I know the last couple draft analyses I've done, I haven't uploaded any battles, and that I'm sure is annoying for anyone that actually does watch my videos. So, we're here today, and I've got 4 different drafts to introduce to you. 2 of which I've already started battles with. The other 2 I just drafted very recently, and so let's get right into it with the WBC. So this one in particular was an NUPU draft. And the thing about it is, it's an NUPU draft, and we got to franchise them on from our previous OU drafts the season before, as long as they were in NU or PU. And so what I got to do was I got to franchise Sneasel. Now, Sneasel is one heck of a mod in the NUPU format, and especially because Dark Ice is such an incredible offensive typing. It has Pursuit Trapping, it has just the coverage it needs, it has base 115 speed, and in general that just starts my roster off in a perfect position for an offensive draft, obviously, because that's generally what I work with. But Sneasel, it also has priority, it's also a good choice user. It's just overall a great offensive mod to start out my draft with, and it eliminates the need to draft Dark type later on when those actually start to get, when good Dark types start to get kind of scarce. So I like having Sneasel here, it really works out. But then the draft started. Pretty much everyone franchised them on if they could, so the draft kind of started one round in, and that was okay with me, because I got, if I remember correctly, I got a pretty decent pick, and I was able to pick up Xatu. Now, Xatu is a mon that's kind of a blanket check for everything. Its stats aren't that great, but it's kind of like Clefable in that its typing and its abilities actually really helped it out in the long run. And being able to magic bounce things back, being able to actually defog now that Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon have come out. In general, I just love having this mon, and it has incredible offensive capability, it has incredible defensive professionalism. It has incredible defensive capabilities with Sneasel because it resists fighting types. Both of them are weak to rock, but their synergy is actually quite nice. That was the word I was looking for. But what Sneasel has in offense, Xatu has in defense. Being able to magic bounce, defog, like I said, it has Thunder Wave, Calm Mind. It just has a lot of defensive support capabilities, and that means that it was a nice way to pair up with a very offensive, very frail mon. But then I was thinking quickly that I needed at least something in a Dragon Fairy Steel Core, because I knew those mons would be going really quickly, and I saw a lot of potential in Kling Klang. Now, Kling Klang is a mon that is kind of overlooked a lot of the time, but was making a quick rise at the time of the draft in the NU tier, and so I decided to pick it up and give it a go. It is one of my 2 Z users for this draft, and Kling Klang is another offensive piece that pairs up really nice with Xatu, and also Sneasel as well, because Sneasel, while is more of a hit and run attacker, whereas Kling Klang sets up in your face and kind of is more of a cleaner. So you've got this wall breaking, and then you've got this cleaning sense to the team offensively already. And while both are weak to fighting, that is also checked by Xatu. And overall, that just makes for, first of all, great value, and second of all, just excellent offensive capabilities already. But what I noticed right away was that the team was really weak to fire, and sort of weak to like rock and ground. So what I decided to do was pick up a water type, because I didn't want to wait too much longer for my water type. I didn't want that to get in the way of my draft being actually good. So what I did was I selected Samurott. Now, I mentioned wall breaking capabilities earlier, and Samurott, that's what it does in the NU tier. Boosted Hydro Pumps, Priority and Aqua Jet, Swords Dance, Mega Horn, Knockoff. It has just the move pool it needs to run mixed sets, and that is great when all I had were physical attackers and Xatu up to this point. Stab, Life Orb, Hydro Pump does a number on a lot of different things, and in general, it was just a great mon to start out with, or not to start out with, but to have early on in the draft, especially because wall breaking capabilities with a decent speed tier kind of get washed down like the farther you go into NUPU, and so having Samurott there was, with its versatility, like having the wall breaking power to go with two mons that excel in being speedy cleaners is just so much better to have. Plus, as a water type, its bulk is not that bad either. All things considered, Samurott is a really great mon, and I love it. But I noticed at that point that I really wanted a grass type, and I didn't want to, again, like, throughout this whole draft, the theme is not wanting to wait on value. And so what I decided to do was pick up Gourgeist Super. Now, Gourgeist, I mean, I've drafted it in other leagues before because it is such value for NUPU as a grass-type bulky mon with Will-O-Wisp. Grass Ghost is not the best typing out there, but it's really nice to dodge normal and fighting type moves, which are actually like really good in League format. And considering that I didn't have an electric resist up to this point, it was useful to grab that. And I didn't want Gourgeist to get taken away, because by this point, like, I was already worrying about snipes. I think I already did get sniped by this point, and I was just putting together like a solid plan for everything. And my next pick was the result of a snipe, because I wanted Sock. Sock is a great fighting type, mold breaker, excellent move pool. So what I decided to do was take basically Sock Light in Passimian. Now, Passimian may not be as good as Sock, but it also has access to U-turn. It has Gunk Shot, which is something that Sock doesn't. And it has a little bit more bulk too, having 100 base HP. I really appreciate being able to take some moves a lot better than Sock would, even though Sock sometimes can run sturdy. Base 80 speed is not too far off from Sock's base 85. And so, like, Sock, or Passimian is basically just everything I wanted in Sock, but just a little bit worse. That said, I wish it had an ability that was somewhat decent, but at the same time, like, it's a great mon that I'm sure not as many people thought of as I would have originally, like, anticipated, because it's a mon that kind of flies under the radar a lot of the time, especially with the new tutor moves. Now that it actually got the new tutor moves in Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, it has that variety move pool that it just didn't before in regular Sun and Moon, and I can really appreciate that as a fighting type. I love fighting types. So again, after Passimian, I was sniped on a couple of different things, if I remember correctly. This draft happened a little while ago. I wanted Vipilon, I know, and that was sniped from me, so I decided to take my fire type a little bit earlier so that I could, like, actually get it and not worry about it later. And my fire type ended up being Ninetales. Now, Ninetales is an interesting pick because it's speedy. It's base 100, which is not the speediest thing out there, but it's also speedy enough to be an offensive mon, and I can really appreciate that in conjunction with Nasty Plot. It also has Flash Fire, which is very useful defensively, and Ninetales has some potential defensively as well for being a fire type. In general, it's one of those mons that wishes that Drought was allowed in the league, but at the same time, if we did allow Drought in our league, I don't think that would have been a very good idea. So I'm glad it wasn't. But Ninetales with Nasty Plot, Fire Blast is a really useful stab move, and low base stats with high base power moves generally seems to be a better idea than high stats with low base power moves. And stuff like Pyroar and Magmortar were already flying off the board, so I thought Ninetales was a good mon to not only check those, but to also be my offensive fire type. But by this point I was looking for a flying type that used flying type moves effectively now that Vivillon was out of the picture. And I was looking and I'm just like, well, I also need a normal type too. So, like, I thought, well, let's go after something that may be a little bit unorthodox, but is still like a huge threat in a league format like this. And that mon was Chatot. Now, Chatot looks like unintimidating at first, but you get that set. But you look at its move pool and you realize that it has access to Nasty Plot and Boom Burst, which is incredible considering it's a stab Boom Burst off 91 base special attack. And everyone talks about X-Cloud's Boom Burst, but they don't really talk about Chatot's Boom Burst, even though Chatot's special attack is higher than X-Cloud's. And that brings me to another point. Even though X-Cloud can run spec because it has Scrappy and everything, Chatot has Chatter, which with a 100. Chatter has a 100% chance to confuse, and that can be huge whenever using Chatot because Chatot is fairly frail. So even though it's faster and stronger than X-Cloud would be, the fact that it doesn't have a Ghost Resist, or the fact that it can't hit Ghost types, is normally a problem. So Chatter helps be able to hit those Ghost types and be able to 1v1 them effectively. Unless they're running Ice Punch, which, I mean, that's kind of a shame. But yeah, Chatot's frailty is helped by the fact that Chatter is a 100% chance to confuse, and the fact that it learns Roost. So overall, decent choice user, decent setup cleaner, a decent wall breaker in general, and it's a mon that not a whole lot of people would have thought of, but it's a mon that I'd love to have on my squad. At this point, though, I was looking for a little bit more defensive utility, especially more fighting resists, because as it stood, a fighting type with knockoff just completely ran through my squad. So I decided that a good mon for my team would be Weezing. Now, Weezing is is a mon that doesn't have reliable recovery, obviously, unlike Gorgeist. But it serves as a nice blanket check to a lot of physical attackers, and with Will-O-Wisp and a decent special move pool, it can actually be a useful tank. Toxic Spikes are a great development for a team that's kind of centered around bulky offense, in the sense that I have a lot of wall breakers and very little frail cleaners. So having Toxic Spikes, it makes me able to actually whittle down bulky opponents and then start to KO them with a cleaner later on. And so having Weezing here, especially with this late of a pick, was great value for me. But by this point, my electric type had been sniped. So I decided to save that for later and grab something that had significant value. But my ground type also got sniped. So I decided to change my plan up a little bit And I went with another offensive mon that I thought was huge value for the time, and that was Lycanroc. Now, Lycanroc Day is overshadowed by Lycanroc Dusk, like in higher tiers, but in lower tiers, it has just enough coverage in Drill Run and Brick Break to actually make use of its decent attack stat and actually really good speed tier, base 112. That makes it my second mon to go over base 100, meaning that I have, or base 110, meaning that I have decent speed control all around, at least in my opinion. It has good priority, which is kind of a theme running along some of my good offensive mons here. And in general, like, I appreciate the fact that it can SD clean, it can wall break, it can set rocks, and it's actually really powerful for a mon that I'm getting this late in the draft. By this point, I was kind of looking for value at this specific pick, unlike the next two picks, which are just kind of finishing off the type coverage that I needed. And so I just grabbed Lycanroc because I thought it would be cool, I guess. So my next pick, I saved my electric type for last because I figured no one was going to snipe it, because it was a little bit eccentric. So I decided to pick up my dragon, because I needed a dragon and I needed a ground type, especially because otherwise my team was going to be fairly weak to electric still. And so I decided to pick up Gabite. Now obviously it's not the best dragon out there, but Gabite has a useful niche in that it has base 82 speed and base 90 attack. With Eviolite and its defenses become somewhat reasonable, and it has rough skin. So it can fire off earthquakes, it can set rocks, it can be like a mini tank chomp of sorts, and for this late in the game, that's not a bad thing to have. I, again, needed a dragon and I needed a ground type, so this really worked out for me. I don't have a whole lot to say other than that. It's unfortunate it doesn't get Swords Dance, but it can be a useful Scarfer, it can even be a Life Orb set, but Eviolite just has a lot of value on this mon. So then finally I decided to pick up my electric type, obviously, and I decided, because of our rule that all Silvally were separated, unlike some of the other leagues, I decided to pick up Silvally Electric. Now, every Silvally that you draft, you get both Silvally Electric, or Silvally Normal, and the type that you chose. So this Silvally is actually both Silvally Electric and Silvally Normal. So people were starting to draft Electivire and Electabuzz at this point, but I thought like Silvally Electric was just a better mon to have, because it actually has the coverage to back up its electric typing in being a pivot. So Parting Shot and then Bolt Beam coverage with Stab Thunderbolt and then Defog, because my team had decent hazard control up to this point, but not great hazard control. Like, Xatu was good at hazard control, Chatot got Defog, but it wasn't really a good hazard remover. But Silvally is just an excellent hazard remover for late tiers, and having an electric type that can remove hazards is just everything I needed in a mon at that point in time. So that concluded my WBC draft. And looking at the team, it was a good balance of both defensive and offensive mons. A good balance of wall breakers, cleaners. I just thought I hit on this draft very well. I wasn't too sure about Gabite, but Gabite proves itself later. And in general, I just thought this turned out to be quite an excellent draft. So that means we're going to be moving on to the SDL. And we're back with the SDL. Alright, let's get going. I say we're back because I actually paused the recording to go get a drink. Yeah, that's a thing. And change the music, because I feel like just listening to one track over the entire draft would be kind of obnoxious. So I am sorry if the music transitions are a bit awkward. So, the SDL. With the SDL, I got the second pick in the draft. But I really didn't want to pick anything that, like, I don't want to pick mons that were just the same mons. Or at least I didn't want to pick like Lando T, Tapu Koko, the same things that go in number 2 all the time. Because I'd already used all those to some extent, and I'm not really a fan of any of them. So what I decided to do was plan to hopefully take the one mon that they were including that was not in normal drafts, which is the fact that they allowed Darkrai with no Z moves or Nasty Plot, which I found a little weird, but I still accepted because I really wanted to use it. And then it got drafted in number 1 overall, because why wouldn't it? So I just decided, you know what, I'm just going to go with a safe plan and get a mon that's going to solidify my draft, instead of trying to like build around something that I know I'm not going to appreciate very much. So what I did with the number 2 overall pick was I picked Mega Aggron. Now Mega Aggron is a bulky tank. It's a great steel type because, well, steel types are already good, but Filter is an incredible ability that allows Mega Aggron to just do anything it really needs to do involving tanking things. Its physical defense is absolutely insane, taking stuff like a Zygarde's Banded 1,000 Arrows and not even getting to it KO'd. And it has a decent move pool with the Elemental Punches, like Iron Head, Heavy Slam and Gyro Ball depending on the team, Earthquake, Rocks, Thunder Wave. I just really liked what Mega Aggron gave me as a Mega, and it allowed me to get extra points for this tiered draft. So I just decided to take it and roll with it. But of course, I needed a mon that could actually like intimidate other people, like actually do a lot of attacking work, because I'm an offensive guy. I need offensive drafts to some extent, and like bulky offense is great, you know, like, well, I'm sure you know if you're watching this that bulky offense does work. Because in draft format you need to be able to both deal with mons that are lures and be able to lure the other mons. So mons with great move pools and mons that are great at being speedy and attacking are also great. So a mon that I always pick up is a mon that I'm going to be getting here today, and that is Thundurus Incarnate. Thundurus Incarnate at space 111 speed, and with Prankster Thunder Wave, and also the ability Defiant too, really allows Thundurus to just do a lot of different things. It can run Nasty Plot, it can run Life Orb 4 attacks, it can run Life Orb 3 attacks plus Thunder Wave. It now has Defog, which is useful, but oftentimes it's not going to want to give up the move slot for Defog, which I can respect. But I also like the fact that it can defog and be a secondary defogger for my team as a whole. And plus it's an electric type, and fast electric types are just great for draft format. And I feel like Thundurus falls down the draft board a lot more often than it should. I don't know why, but oftentimes it's served me so well, and so I decided to pick it up again. But now by this point I'd already had a draft plan kind of forming. And I decided to get a mon that was a tier 4, I believe, to add to my Pokemon as a whole. And grabbing a tier 4 early means that I got a value tier 4. If this thing was tier 4, I'm pretty sure it was tier 4. It was Emboar. Now, Emboar is like a fat Infernape. That's the best way I can put it in draft format, because Infernape, I believe, is one of the best mons in draft format for its ability to do practically anything. Emboar, on the other hand, can't do everything, especially because it doesn't have the setup moves that Infernape does, but it has an incredible move pool for what it needs, and it's a great Scarfer. It has a lot of power behind it, and in general, it's really hard to find a switch in for Emboar with this Reckless ability. Wild Charge, Head Smash, Flare Blitz are all really good abilities, are really good moves. Double Edge can work in certain circumstances. I like Superpower as a stab move because Firefighting is a great offensive typing. It still gets Earthquake. It has a usable special attack stat with moves like Scald and the Hidden Powers. And overall, I just like its ability to be an offensive threat while also not having that bad of bulk because of its HP stat. So in general, it's a really great mon to have this early, and I wanted to have some variety in my move pools. So already I've already got the fast attacker, the wall breaker, and the bulky mon. So that's the first step. But at that point, I wanted another rocker and another fast wall breaking mon. And a mon that's, again, served me well throughout a lot of my leagues. But not as many as Thunderous. And that Pokemon is Azelf. Now, Azelf is not incredibly, it doesn't have a lot of things that it can do, but the things that it does really well. It can be a suicide lead, it can be a nasty plot attacker, and it can be like a physical lure or a 4 attacks life orb set. And that's still a lot of things, but it's just not like, it doesn't have the variety and move pool that Thunderous does. And it's a tad bit frailer, so, but it's also a tad bit faster, and it's a tad bit stronger. So Azelf, being a psychic type, has access to both psychic and Psy Shock to be able to hit especially defensive mons. Fire Blast is a great move. The hidden powers, I believe it gets Thunderbolt, Dazzling Gleam. For a nasty plot attacker, it has an excellent move pool, and a base 115 speed tier is just absolutely incredible. And Azelf has carried me through at least one league's playoffs before, so being able to have Azelf again was really a boon to having this team. But then I realized I couldn't wait any longer for my dragon, and so I decided to pick up Goodra. I'm not a huge fan of Goodra, but I wanted to try it out in this league, mainly because it's a really good bulky dragon, and my Dragon Fairy Steel Core was meant to be kind of bulky in this situation. So having a special defense dragon paired with a physically defensive steel, I figured would be a good core to have, especially when both can be unique bulky attackers. And Goodra's ability to run Specs Band, Assault Vest, probably even Scarf. If people don't have fairies or really good steals, it can run a Curse Outrage set, which would be really fun to run one week if I had the opportunity. But in general, I just really liked how Goodra fit in this plan. But I also still wanted to keep on the offensive. Grab another mon that would fill out my speed control, because later in my plan it was looking like I was going to get a lot of mons that would actually slow me down. And so getting a mon that, again, can secondarily defog as well as have a lot of power behind it and a lot of speed behind it would be useful in the long run, and I decided to pick up Superior. Now, Superior only does a couple of different things. It can defog, and it runs its Leaf Storm sweeping set, its breaking set. Getting +2 from Contrary on each Leaf Storm is an incredible thing for Superior, and I really like Superior's design. I like its base 113 speed. I like the fact that it has basically what it needs. And it and Thunderous are my Z-Mons, so being able to have a Superior that can use Z Hyper Beam in order to get past a couple of its checks really helps Superior be an excellent, cleaning mon. Which I have a few of in this draft already, but I really appreciate the ability to have. Especially because at this point I was racking up water resists. And in general, I just thought it was a good mon to be able to just kind of plug in here as value. Especially because I had extra points because of Mega Aggron. So next I decided I wanted another rocker. I wanted another mon. I wanted a mon that has priority, because really the only priority I had were Prankster and Sucker Punch and Emboar at this point. And I wanted a ground type, because ground types are useful in any draft format, and so I decided to pick up Mamoswine. Now I've had Mamoswine, like I've got the IBF on my channel previously where I used Mamoswine, and that put in a lot of work for me in the IBF. Its Life Orb, Earthquake, and Icicle Crash are they hit incredibly hard off that base 130 attack stat, and base 80 speed is nothing to shake a stick at, because it's a usable Scarfer speed, and it's also a usable Life Orb speed for breaking. And it also has the ability to set rocks, which it does actually increasingly well. And being able to be a ground type that can beat a lot of bulky grass types is just an excellent thing to have. And it allows me to have another wall breaker that is at, like, not an incredibly high speed, but also hits a lot harder without setup. Having a non-setup wall breaker is infinitely useful, because you don't have to waste a turn trying to get past the wall, which can then toxic you and start to actually whittle you down. But at this point, I already had my dragon and my steel, and a lot of fairies that I wanted were actually taken away from me, so I wanted to make sure that I got a fairy by this point, and so I decided to pick up Aromatisse. Now, Aromatisse was kind of one of those mons that I picked it up because it had a lower tier than a lot of the other fairies that were still left on the board, but Aromatisse still had amazing value, especially as an offensive Trick Room setter. It benefited things like Embor and Mega Aggron in the sense that it sets up Trick Room, and also it itself functions really well in Trick Room, having gotten Nasty Plot from the Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon tutors. And Nasty Plot plus Moonblast actually hurts a lot, because Fairy is a busted typing, and so usually all you really need with the hidden power boost off that 99 base special attack is Moonblast and a hidden power. But it can run things like Thunderbolt and Psychic to actually complement itself really well. And it also functions as a neat cleric, having Wish and Aromatherapy, as well as decent bulk, so it can run both offensive and defensive sets, making it actually a lot more versatile than it looks on first glance. But I figured that I could actually run an offensive Trick Room core, and that just doing so would actually benefit me in the long run, and having a ghost type is actually great because there aren't a lot of ghost resists in both leagues and in standard formats, because there's really only two types that can deal with ghost, and that is normal type because it's immune, and dark type because it's the only resist. Everything else is hit at least neutrally by ghost. So ghost type is an incredible offensive typing, and pairing that with another offensive Trick Room setter, we've got Cofagrigus. Cofagrigus is an offensive Trick Room setter, and my third Z user, and it has the ability to run Ghost EMZ to actually break a couple of things along its pathway with +2 Neverending Nightmare, but it also has the ability to be run bulky with Haze, Will-O-Wisp, Toxic Spikes. It has a very nice defensive move pool, and its offensive move pool is just good enough to be able to actually run an offensive Trick Room. And so having two offensive Trick Room setters has been infinitely useful, or looks like it'll be infinitely useful, because they're bulky and they're offensive at the same time, and so they make excellent win cons. So I needed a tier 5 mon at this point, and as one can see, I do not have a water type. So naturally I decided to grab a tier 5 water type, and that would be Barbaracle. Barbaracle is a Shell Smash Sweeper. It's a water type, it's a rock type. I don't have either of those typings yet, but Shell Smash is just one of those things that if you do not prepare for it properly in League format, you're just going to get absolutely obliterated by it. And so Barbaracle as a tier 5 mon, it was just excellent value for me, in my opinion. And so I decided to take it, because having it there means people need to prep for it more. And if I do decide to bring it, there's that chance that they haven't prepped for it enough, and Shell Smash is going to absolutely obliterate them with Tough Claws boosted Razor Shell and Stab Stone Edge, or Tough Claws boosted Cross Chop. And maybe I'll have Tough Claws boosted Grass Knot to deal with water and ground types, or I'll have I believe it learns Earthquake. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it learns Earthquake. It has a good move pool for its niche, and I really like Barbarical as a mon. But what I noticed, like, towards the end of the draft, was, first of all, that I kind of had some leeway on this last pick, and second of all, that I was actually kind of weak to Edgequake, in the sense that I didn't have a single mon that resisted both both Stone Edge and Earthquake. And in fact, I had a lot of mons that are weak to it, like Aggron's weak to Earthquake, Thundurus is weak to Stone Edge, Emboar's weak to Earthquake, Mamoswine's weak to Stone Edge, and Barbarical's weak to Earthquake. So I decided to grab a mon that's fairly bulky, that I can at least take Stone Edges a lot better, because kind of throwing a rock at my team did a lot more work than I liked. And I saw that I didn't have a Dark type, so I decided to do was grab Scrafty. Now Scrafty, it's not just there because of the fighting Dark typing, but also because like it's a decent bulky win con, which I didn't really have. Like I had both Cofagrigus and I had Aromatisse, but neither of them were really this kind of bulky kind of, neither of them were the kind of mons that I was planning on just sitting there and setting up with. Like, Scrafty has the Rest Bulk Up Shed Skin set, which kind of performs in the sense of the slow setup that neither mon had. Cofagrigus could, but oftentimes I wasn't going to, just because the offensive Trick Room set just did more right off the bat. And so having Scrafty is kind of like this specially or physically defensive mon that can run a slow setup was actually a really useful thing to have for this team, and I really appreciated what it did as a whole. So that's my SDL draft. As you can see, there are only 11 mons because it's a standard tier draft, and overall I thought it came out really nicely. Having the bulky Fairy Dragon Steel Core with Aromatisse being able to Wish Pass to either Goodra or Mega Aggron, and Mega Aggron being physically defensive and Goodra being specially defensive, plus my plethora of offensive mons such as Superior, Thundurus, and Azelf on the fast side, and then Emboar, Aromatisse, and Cofagrigus on the slower side, plus a couple of middle speed tiers that can kind of do a little bit of everything in Barbarical and Mamoswine. I thought it really just... A lot of the mons here aren't as one-dimensional as they seem, and that is really what I like about this draft as a whole. It's bulky offense, so I don't have to be too offensive with it, but I also don't have to be too defensive with it either. And I think that helps make a draft good. So next, we're going to cover one of the leagues I've been in for a long, long time, the WWCL. See you at the music change. Alright, we're back. It's time for the WWCL. So this draft is a little bit different in the sense that it allowed an Uber, actually. It allowed one Uber for each draft, and kind of cut down the amount of Ubers that were allowed in such a draft format. So it kind of was meant to have the Uber be more of a centerpiece to the team as a whole. And I got the number 7 pick here out of 12, so I was placed, or out of 16, so I was placed roughly right above the middle. So I wasn't very happy about that, and a couple of snipes happened, so that was fun. But in general, I think the team turned out pretty well, so let's get started. Well, first of all, right off the bat, I got the Uber I wanted at number 7 somehow, even though I wouldn't have been surprised if it went in the top 5. But it kind of dropped into my lap at number 7, and that Uber was Dialga. Now, Dialga wasn't banned. None of the cover legendaries for 4th gen were banned, although a lot of cover legendaries were. It was just really the Kanto Legends. Well, no, actually, not a lot of cover legendaries were banned. The only ones that were banned were Kyogre, the Gen 6 Legends, and, yeah, Kyogre and the Gen 6 cover Legends. But also, there were a lot of mods that were restricted, such as Mewtwo, Marshadow, the Necrozma forms, stuff like that. So, like, you didn't have any Arceus forms, and in general, I thought Dialga had a lot of value as both a Dragon and a Steel type, which would make my Dragon Fairy Steel core a lot easier to handle. And Dragon Fairy Steel cores are usually, like, very important for a draft format, in my opinion. So having Dragon and Steel in one place was helpful, as well as something that is actually fairly bulky, has Thunder Wave, a useful Dragon typing along with Fire coverage, Ground coverage, Steel to help it combat Fairies, so it's not weak to the Fairy type, as much as a lot of other Uber Dragons would be. Plus, it gets access to Stealth Rocks, which is great to have your Uber just kind of be able to do whatever, especially because it's a centerpiece to a lot of what I want to do. And so, I picked my Uber, and that was Dialga. So, at this point, I didn't really have a plan, and I was just deciding to kind of take whatever fell into my lap in terms of value, and that one ended up being Ash Greninja. Now, obviously, this one is on cart. This league is in a cart league, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to record the matches for this league. But, obviously, it can't come pre-transformed. But, since it's a tier 1, it's Ash Greninja. Like, I can actually have Battle Bond Greninja. And Greninja as a whole, I think, is a great mon in Draft League. But Ash Greninja takes it to a whole different level because it's really easy to get a lure kill on something, or at least kill something with a stab Hydro Pump, because Hydro Pump hits incredibly hard from regular Greninja, and after one kill, Ash Greninja is just absolutely monstrous in terms of stats. Its attack and special attack and speed are all ludicrous, and so having Ash Greninja is just, again, absolutely ludicrous, especially because its move pool is actually really good. It doesn't get all the hidden powers, which is kind of obnoxious, but it gets stuff like Grass Knot, Extra Sensory, Gunk Shot, Low Kick, Stabs. I really like Ash Greninja, and I figured it would be a useful mon to sub in as kind of a water and a dark type. And just having it is a tier 1 that I never expected I would have. But then, round 2, I had something else kind of fall into my lap that I didn't really expect to have, and that mon was Mega Diancie. Now, this offensive core felt absolutely insane with Dialga, Ash Greninja, and Mega Diancie. Mega Diancie actually was my Mega for the first league I was ever in, which I think brings some nostalgia factor back, because I haven't had this mon since then. Plus, a lot of Ubers are Dragon types, and Mega Diancie being a Fairy type, and a strong Fairy type at that, helps to be able to combat those Dragon types, especially because of the speed tier buff that Gen 7 gives Mega Diancie. Plus, its move pool is actually pretty good. It has what it needs. Again, Hidden Powers, Earth Power, Moonblast, Diamond Storm, Power Gem, Rock Polish, Calm Mind. It can even still run Protect to scout some things, which might not always be the best move, but it's still a really helpful move to have on occasion. Base 110 speed, base 160 offenses, base 110 special defenses. Its stats are absolutely incredible, and having a Fairy type this early, especially one that can combat dragons very effectively, and having two very fast, very strong mons on my squad is a cool thing to have. But it also limits my points too, because I don't get a tier 2 or tier 3 Mega that might have given me some point values later on. and that actually affects my draft later. But after that point, I decided to take a mon with extreme value in Tier 3, and that mon was Nidoking. Now, Nidoking is both a wall breaker and a hazard stacker. It can run rocks and toxic spikes, but it can also use its insane special move pool and physical move pool to do a number on a lot of mons. Scarf, Life Orb. I'm sure it could run specs if it wanted to. I don't see why it would in a lot of situations, but it could. Expert Belt. It's got Flamethrower, Thunderbolt, Ice Beam, Stabs, Focus Blast. I just Rock Slide. And Sheer Force is just an incredible ability. And with decent offenses on both sides of the spectrum with Sheer Force, it's just a mon that can do so much in so many different scenarios. And I thought it'd be a really fun mon to have with two speedy mons and kind of this tanky mon, to have like a pure wall breaker without like setup or transformation or whatever. But at that point, I was still kind of looking for value, and I saw something in Tier 4 that really caught my eye, and it's something familiar, and that is Silvally. So this time, Silvally is not restricted by type. I can use any type whatsoever, and considering it was a Tier 4 pick, it meant that I didn't have to worry a whole lot about everything else I was getting in terms of points. And that made it so that my draft could be... It counteracted a lot of the point issues that Mega Dynasty would give me. Especially because Silvally can just do everything. It can be any type, it can defog. And its move pool is incredible. And 95 base defenses and 95 base offenses are all decent. Obviously they're not incredible, but they're decent. And that means Silvally can just do so much for a squad that at this point was just kind of an offensive powerhouse. And so this Silvally just kind of made sure everything was synergized properly. And that's what I liked about being able to pick Silvally. But at that point, I also was looking at something that resisted ground, because at that point I had 3 ground weeks, and Silvally could be a resist, but it wouldn't be always a resist. And Ash Greninja was an offensive check, but it wasn't really a defensive check when it came to grounds. So I decided to grab something that was a ground resist while also providing me with the useful typing, and a mon that's actually served me well throughout generations, and that is Heracross. Now, I've described what Heracross can do in so many situations, although Gen 7 has given it a significant buff with the ability to run Flame Orb sets a lot more effectively due to the nerf of Burn. So it's a buff to... Well, it's a buff to Heracross's Burn in the sense that it only does a little bit of damage, like 6% instead of 12.5%, which means that the residual damage on Guts Heracross is definitely not as much as it was before. And so Guts Heracross was something like Swords Dance Facade and Knockoff or Megahorn hits really hard on a decent 85 speed tier. That outruns a lot of different walls. So Heracross has an incredible position as a wall breaker. And considering the fact that I have a couple of speedy cleaners already, and a couple of mons, and a mon that can run Scarf, having a wall breaker is incredible. As well as the fact that it doesn't even have to run Guts. Like, it probably won't even run Guts most of the time. It has Scarf sets, it has Banded sets, it has SD sets that with Moxie, it has SD sets just in general. Like, the mon is great. Like, it has a lot of things it can do, and I'm really happy to have Heracross again, because it just, I don't know, it does so much as both a cleaner and a wall breaker. But next we have a mon that I have not been able to use very much at all, both in draft format and outside of draft format, and it's a mon that I'm always really excited to use in-game, and that mon is Gyarados. Gyarados is a really threatening mon, really threatening mon, because it has the ability to set up and just do a lot of damage. with both Moxie and Intimidate are great abilities, and it's a Z user of mine, so we can run Flame EMZ, Ground EMZ, Water EMZ, Rock EMZ. It has a good move pool, and for being a physical attacker with Dragon Dance, being a setup cleaner, which I actually don't have a lot of in this draft up to this point, it's an incredible mod. Yes, it stacks water types, but their only shared weakness is electric, and at this point I have an electric immunity and an electric resist and another potential immunity and resist. So being able to stack types is not that bad, and having the kind of bulky Dragon Dancer with a decent speed tier to begin with helps in the long run more than it would to not stack typings. But at that point, I was kind of running out of points because I had a tier 1 in mind that I wanted way later on in draft. And so I decided to grab some low tier mons finally, and I picked up Raichu. Now Raichu might not look that great on first glance, but first of all it's a Z user, and Z moves are incredible in draft format, but also it learns Nasty Plot, and it's actually pretty fast with Lightning Rod. So having an electric immunity, plus the ability to set up to +2, plus the ability to actually use Waterium or Fightinium to actually get past some checks, makes for an excellent tier 5 pick. And considering I needed a fast electric, it's one of those mons that just kind of fit with what I was looking for. And so I really like having Raichu here. My next pick, I was going to pick Sneasel, but then one of the mons that I wanted later got sniped in Delmise. So I needed another mon that was... so in the same tier, there was another Ghost type with hazard removal. And so I just decided to pick that up right then, because I thought it was more valuable than trying to go after Sneasel right away. Because getting another ground resist was useful, considering that I was again adding another weakness in Raichu. So I decided to pick up Decidueye. Now unfortunately this Decidueye can't be one of my Z users, but what it can be is a Swords Dance Wallbreaker, it can be a Trapper, it can be a Nasty Plot Wallbreaker, it can be a Hazard Remover, it can be a semi-bulky mon. Decidueye just has a lot of versatility to it, and despite the fact that it doesn't have as much speed as I would like it to have, it has bulk to kind of back it up. And Ghost typing, like I mentioned earlier, is just an incredible typing. So I feel like having a Ghost type paired with my Grass type that isn't like Gourgeist and actually has some physical presence was really useful for this kind of offensive breaky team that I was putting together. And I really like the Decidueye. I really like it a lot. It's a mon that I've never used, and so I'm excited to use it. But speaking of mons that I've used, after this round, Sneasel actually got sniped. So I wanted another Ice type, and looking at my plan squad, I was actually kind of weak to both Freeze Dry and Fairy types. So by getting my next mon, I didn't have to worry as much about Fairy types, because it wasn't another Dark type. It was just Ice type. So what I picked up was Vanillux. Now Vanillux, for 2 generations, it did not look like a very good mon. It does not have an incredible move pool. Its stats were decent, but they weren't fantastic. But then in Gen 7, it got Snow Warning, and that changed everything for this mon in terms of being in NU and PU. Vanillux now gets a 100% accurate Blizzard. Freeze Dry hits all water types. Hidden Powers hit things pretty hard, and it gets Autotomize, which means that it can boost its speed and suddenly become a cleaner too. But with 100% accurate Blizzards, this thing suddenly became an incredible wall breaker, considering that Ice type is often underprepared for in draft. And in general, having an Ice type for a wall breaker means that I actually got to use that to my advantage, and Vanilla hits actually really hard. Base 120, base 110 move off a base 110 special attack stat was something that I was really looking forward to using. But then I needed a fire type, and I figured, again, I don't have a normal type besides like Silvally, and I want a good fire type, so I decided to get something with another good speed tier, since I'd kind of been picking a decent amount of like middling speed tier mons. Like after Nidoking, the only mon I picked up over base 110 speed was Raichu. So I decided to pick up something that was at least over base 100, and that was Pyroar. Now I could have gotten Typhlosion with this pick, but due to the rules with Z users in this league, this league actually runs off the basis of Z points, where you're only allowed to use a number of Z users based on which tier each of your Z users is in. Tier 5s are worth 20, tier 4s are worth 40, tier 3s are 50, tier 2s are 60, and tier 1s are 80. So, tier 2 Gyarados and tier 5 Raichu and Pyroar make for an excellent trio of Z users. Even though they're not the best Z users I could have possibly had on my team, they're all functional Z users. And that's what, and having a few mons be upgraded from okay to good, I think is better than having one mon be upgraded from great to a little more great, and one other mon being upgraded from okay to good. Like, I could have given the Z Crystal to, let's say, Ash Greninja, but Ash Greninja doesn't really need the Z Crystal in order to function, whereas the three mons that I gave Z Crystal to, being Gyarados, Raichu, and Pyroar, all really appreciate having the Z Crystal. Pyroar, in particular, doesn't have a fantastic move pool, so having the Z move actually allows it to break through some of its checks. And Pyroar actually hits fairly hard. Base 109 special attack with a dual normal fire stabs are not bad stabs, and in general, it's a one that looks kind of underrated to me. It also gets Will-O-Wisp. It gets Dark typing. It gets Hidden Powers. Obviously, its move pool is not very great. Its ability is not that great, but its stats actually serve it pretty well. And having Fire Normal dual typing means that a lot of water types that would resist Fire Blast actually get hit pretty hard by Hyper Voice, and I really like Pyroar as a mon. But by this point, I was looking, and I actually wanted a bulky Psychic type. And one mon that I had been looking at previously, Cresselia, got drafted like way back. And so I decided to pick another decent Psychic type with ground immunity, and that mon was Latias. Now at this point, neither of the Lati twins had been drafted at the last round of the draft, which to a lot of people seemed absolutely insane. But I looked and saw it there, and I just thought it was the perfect opportunity to grab Latias. Latias can run Combine, it can run Defog, it can run Scarf, it can probably even run Specs. It has lure moves because its move pool is actually pretty good. It can actually be like a lure tank, like it can deal with some mons that my team wouldn't be able to deal with previously. And it adds a little bit of needed bulk to this team because it's actually a fairly offensive team. Plus it adds another base 110 speed user, and that means that I actually have decent speed control as a whole. And so I liked having Latias here as my final pick, although at first I wasn't really too excited about it. I've now actually like looked at it and considered it a pick that I'm actually really excited about rounding out and adding as glue to the rest of the picks here. So what I think of the WWCL here, I think there's a lot of low tier power. There's a lot of mons that I haven't used, and if I have used them, I haven't used them in a while. Vanillux I haven't used in a little while. Raichu I haven't used. Gyarados I haven't used. Nidoking I haven't used. Pyroar I've used like a little bit. Decidueye I haven't used. Obviously I haven't used Dialga or Ash Greninja. And Mega Dynasty I haven't used since the very beginning of my Draft League format. So I've got a lot of mons that I haven't used here. And I'm actually really excited about that because they're all looking like really fun mons. So, with that, I'm going to move on to my next draft, which was the DAL. See you at the music change. Here we are back at the music change, and that means we're here for the DAL. Now, this was another draft that I was placed at number 7 at. It was 7 out of 12 this time, and so I didn't really expect to get anything really good right off the bat. But I was wrong. I was very, very wrong. I just kind of waited there to see what would kind of fall into my lap, as I usually do with drafts like these. And lo and behold, I got Tapu Koko. Now, I said at the SDL draft that I kind of used Tapu Koko, and I wasn't really a huge fan of it. But I decided to give it another go here in the DAL, because I decided, well, let's have a little fun with this. I liked having Tapu Koko, I just wasn't really good with it. Having Defog and a fast electric right off the bat is really useful, and getting it at number 7, like, I was not expecting to get this kind of value at number 7. So I picked it up immediately, because I'm just like, hey, why not? I'll take it. So immediately I was very happy with what I got. But then I was also confused on what I wanted next. So I consulted a friend, and he told me to pick up Hawlucha. Now, Hawlucha, at least in standard play right now, has been absolutely soaring up the charts because of its electric and grassy seed sets. And now I get to have electric seed Hawlucha here in draft format. And that's incredible for a number of reasons. One, Hawlucha is actually a great sweeper. When Unburden activates and you've got the fighting flying stabs going around. But with electric seed instead of the power herb or subsets, you get to use something like Stone Edge or Roost to allow it to sweep a lot more effectively. And so Hawlucha actually becomes worth the tier 2 pick because it's paired with my Tapu here. And so immediately I've got this incredible offensive core. And usually I would be fine with that and move on to a lot more basics. But I, at this point, had a plan in mind to run Koko Lucha Rain, because that at one point was a huge OU set, or a huge OU team that kind of transformed the meta. And I wanted to try it out, especially because one of my friends, my friend Jameson, always loved Politoed. And I wanted to, for one, dedicate this draft to him, because I draft Politoed later, but also prove to him that I can actually do Rain better, or prove to myself and him that I can do Rain better than he can, because he's kind of a novice battler. I'm mediocre, I guess, and I wanted to see how well I could actually execute Rain, because there had been a lot of times previous to this that I actually got teams from my my draft manager, and he suggested small weather cores, and I wasn't really a huge fan of them because they were mostly sun, and I actually don't like sun as a weather. But I decided I wanted to draft Rain because I just haven't been doing weather that often. So I decided to get all of the stuff that didn't involve Rain out of the way from the beginning. And that worked really well because in round 3 I was able to take Manaphy. Now, getting Manaphy in round 3 was something that I didn't really think about much at the time, but like in hindsight was actually incredible that I managed to be able to do this, because Manaphy is something that normally goes in like one of the first couple of rounds, sometimes doesn't, but usually doesn't like escape maybe like the 5th round. Because it's a useful tier 1 and it actually wall breaks a lot of things. Useful speed tier, useful bulk, tail glow. It doesn't have a whole lot of variety in what it does, but it has a move pool that works with what it does. And so, Manaphy dropping to round 3 and kind of falling into my lap again was something that I didn't expect to be able to have. And all of a sudden, I'm looking like at a really fast electric type with a decent amount of power to it because of Electric Surge. Very good setup cleaner, and a very good setup wall breaker, which is just perfect for an offensive core. And being able to get such an offensive core like this early meant that I was able to focus on my essentials later. And that meant picking Silvally in the 4th round. Now again, Silvally was in tier 3 this time, which is a little less of a value pick, but at the same time it allowed me to have a fire type that didn't always have to be a fire type. Silvally Fire, I'm not going to bring every week, but it's a mon that I can bring, and I don't have to draft a fire type that's just going to be always detrimented by rain. But instead, I can draft Silvally, which can be sometimes benefited by rain, and then other times, when I'm not bringing rain, I can actually benefit by having Silvally in the first place. Plus, it's another defog user that's actually a lot more reliable than something like Coco is. And so, Silvally being able to do a whole lot, it was something that I really appreciated having. But next is a mon that I've used a couple of times in draft format, but I feel like I haven't been able to use to the fullest of its potential yet. I'm sorry for coughing. I really am. And that mon was Escavalier. Now, Escavalier is probably one of my favorite mons, of all time. At least one of my favorite steel types. Its attack is incredible. Its defenses are great. And it being slow can sometimes benefit it, especially with Trick Room. I don't have any Trick Room here, but opposing Trick Room can kind of get cucked by this, so that's useful. But its Banded Megahorn and Ironhead do so much to opponents, and Assault Vest is actually quite bulky. It can run Akaberry to have no weakness for, or only a regular weakness for a turn. And in general, it's just a really useful mon as kind of like bulky glue for everything. And knowing that I was going to have rain later meant that I would be able to have an Escavalier with only one weakness. It already only has one weakness, but only like a regular weakness. And if I wanted to run Akaberry, it didn't have a weakness for a turn. Which, I mean, Escavalier in rain is just, I just thought the situation was so incredible that I had to draft it. But at this point I decided to go for my tier 5, since I kind of had since I was kind of figuring no one was going to snipe rain at this point. It didn't seem like anyone wanted rain. So I decided to go after my tier 5 to get the tier 5 value, and to make sure it wasn't sniped, and that tier 5 was Golurk. Golurk is another mon that I haven't used very often, and it's a Ghost ground type, which is a very interesting typing, only really shared by Palisand. And it's a mon that can actually do a lot more than it looks like it can. Base 55 speed is perfect for something like Rock Polish, which it gets. Base 124 attack is great for Iron Fist boosted Shadow Punches and Stab Earthquakes. It has just enough bulk to run like something like a Colberberry Stealth Rock set, because it's a rocker, and that's also something I didn't have on my team previously. And in general, it's just a really nice mon to help with electric types, which at the moment of that drafting I really only had one resist to. And that mon was an electric type that boosts electric types, so that was not a really great electric type check. And with rain coming up, I knew that I needed something that could deal with electric types a lot better. And so I decided to draft Golurk. who I've never used, and I'm actually really excited to use. So my next pick, at this point, there weren't a lot of mons that I really needed to take before Rain. I knew I could wait on my Mega thanks to a little intel from one of my friends that was also drafting. And my Grass type, I didn't really think was going to get sniped, so I decided to throw the Rain Bomb and select Politoed. Now, at this time, I hadn't told anyone but the people that that knew my draft plan that I was drafting Rain, and I thought there would be a bigger reaction to the fact that I was drafting Rain than there was. But Politoed allows me to actually have Rain in the first place, which means that I've got 100% accurate Thunders from Tapu Koko. I've got boosted Water moves from Manaphy. I've got less weaknesses for Escavalier. And I have even more benefits for some mons that are coming up later. And in general, it just allows me to... it allows me to kind of spam Water-type moves, which are good for dealing with Tapu Koko's checks especially. And Hawlucha can deal with a lot of rain checks, and so all of a sudden my offense just becomes really good. So after that, I decided to get a mon that can actually benefit from electric terrain besides Koko, and also another low tier mon as well as a psychic type mon, so that I had another fighting resist, and that mon was Alolan Raichu. Now, I talked about regular Raichu in my WWCL draft analysis, but Alolan Raichu, having Nasty Plot as well as a decent move pool and rain boosted surfs, makes for a really interesting Z. Well, I haven't determined my Z-mons for this draft at the time of this video, but having Alolan Raichu as a nice Nasty Plot cleaner, as well as something that can run 4 attacks on as it's surge surfing, it could run Scar for Specs. It's a fast electric type, and it's just a really cool fast electric type to have. I really like Alolan Raichu as a mon. And having that psychic type to deal with fighting types offensively a bit better just works very well. But I also found that I needed a grass type, especially for rain, because grass is one of those typings that can actually put a number on rain teams. And so I wanted a grass type that could actually deal with other grass types. And so I decided to draft a Moongus. Now, a Moongus under rain means that it doesn't have to deal with opposing fire types. It doesn't have to worry as much about them. And in turn, it has Regenerator, it has Clear Smog, it has a good Grass Poison defensive typing, it has good defensive stats. Amoonguss is just a nice utility mon since I didn't really have a ton of bulk on this team previously. And being able to have a little bit more bulk on this team actually, aids it a lot more. So being able to have Amoonguss on this squad is a good mon to have. I could have picked Celebi or Breloom, but both of those mons would have been... One of those mons would have been weak to knockoff, and the other would have been redundant with Hawlucha. And so I just decided Amoonguss was the best tier 2 grass to draft. But at this point, I didn't have any rain abusers. Which, I mean, I had mons that benefited from rain, like Amoonguss, Escavalier, Koko, and Raichu, Manaphy, but I needed something that actually abused rain. And I also needed a dragon type, so I decided to pick up Kingdra. Now, of course, it's a rain draft. It would have been ludicrous of me not to pick up at least some rain abuser, and Kingdra, I believe, is one of the best non-Mega Rain abusers. Its typing means that it's only weak to 2 typings, being Fairy and Dragon. And being a Dragon type, it has access to Draco Meteor, which is obviously a great move, but it also has access to Rain-boosted Hydro Pumps, which are even greater. Plus, it's one of the few rain abusers that can actually work outside of rain. And that is huge, because it can run stuff like Critdra. It can run stuff like Dragon Dance Kingdra. And in general, it's a mon that I've wanted to use for a long time, but haven't really had an excuse to. And so now that I have an excuse to, I decided to draft it. Which brings us to our final mon, and the fact that I don't have a Mega yet kind of clues you into the fact that I'm drafting a Mega in the first place. A Mega that I wanted from the very start, but again, I needed an excuse to draft. And as you can see from a lot of mons that are actually costing a decent amount of points, it's a mon that normally is in a low tier when it comes to Megas, and that Mega is Mega Glalie. Now, Mega Glalie is interesting because it's at first glance, it looks like a weird Mega to pair with Rain, but if you look at it closer, it actually is just perfect for Rain, in like almost every circumstance. It's a wall breaker that's not too fast, but not too slow. With Rain being able to boost speed, that helps a lot because like a lot of the things that can take Rain boosted water types are fairly slow. Speaking of things that can take Rain boosted water type moves, Glalie actually hits a lot of those super effectively. Water types, it hits with Freeze Dry, and then Grass and Dragon types, it hits with its Stab, Refrigerate, either Double Edge or Return, which is huge because Ice typing, for one, is still a great typing in draft format. Base 100 speed is a decent speed tier, and it's actually just where it needs to be. And it gets just the move pool it needs. Spikes can help me actually spike stack. I don't have a whole lot of good hazard removers, but I have enough hazard removal where spike stacking could actually make a difference. It gets Super Fang, which actually can't be, it can't have Ghost types Super Fang block it anymore. Obviously, it has its Ice type moves and Freeze Dry. It has Return. It has Earthquake, which is huge. I believe it also gets Crunch, which is actually pretty funny too, but it's also fairly good. And in general, Mega Glalie, I just really like it as a Mega. I believe it's underrated. I believe it doesn't get the respect it deserves, and I feel like I want to give it that respect with this draft. And so that's my DAL draft. This is one of the first times I'm actually using Rain for myself. I've used Rain to help other people prep a lot of the time, and I thought it looked really fun to use with when like actually knowing how to use it. And so I decided I would give it a try, especially since this time I was actually able to get a Coco Lucha, which is such a great offensive core on paper. And I feel like I gave my Rain proper support, with Escavalier and Mega Glalie being able to defeat standard rain checks, with Alolachu and Coco being there to spam Thunders and have a Surge Surfer, plus a decent amount of bulk, enough to be able to not just fall completely to offense that can outspeed me in Escavalier, Golurk, and Amoonguss, and Manaphy to some extent, and definitely Silvally with Parting Shot. Politoed is fairly bulky too. In general, I just feel like this team is incredibly balanced in a way that I don't really have usually. And for a Rain squad that doesn't have to be used in Rain, I think this is the perfect opportunity for me to use something like that. So that is all my drafts. The WBC, the SDL, the WWCL, and the DAL. I hope you guys enjoyed my draft analysis video of all four of these drafts. I wanted to give a specific shout out to the WWCL art, which was made by one of my friend Chris's friends, who needs a little bit more PR. Link will be in the description to the creator of that art. and I believe timestamps will be in the video to view at your leisure. And this has been Blazing and Blitz, hoping that you watch my draft videos for the upcoming drafts in the near future. Peace out, everyone.